Hi, today we continue our series, our four-part series on life on the Overlook, that moment of change, that precipice where we know what has been and we know change is ever present, but we're not sure what is to come. Today I want to look at the book of Numbers. In the book of Numbers, we see a conversation related to the exodus of Egypt. The Hebrew people who wanted to worship their God had been considered slaves as the people of Egypt. And so in the Today we return to our series on life on the Overlook, standing in that moment between what has been, what we know, and knowing that we are in the moment of change, but not sure where we are going in this change, what will be to come. So today we're looking at the book of Numbers, Numbers chapter 11. In the book of Numbers, the Hebrews had left Egypt. They had wanted to worship their God and they had been enslaved in Egypt. God released them through a series of miracles, crossing the Red Sea and moving forward out into the wilderness to head towards their promised land. These refugees, these pilgrims, headed to a place that they didn't know but they believed would be good. There, they encountered difficulty. Change is sometimes difficult to encounter. And there, they began to hunger for what they had left behind. Hear the words of Numbers, chapter 11, verse 5. The Israelites wept again and said, "Who will feed us meat? We remember the free fish we ate in Egypt, along with the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now our appetite is gone, and there's nothing to look at but this manna." Here the Egyptians, the Hebrews, who had been under the rule of the Egyptians, the Hebrews were hungering for what was left behind. They knew that what was left behind wasn't wonderful, but it was familiar. Sometimes we hold on to the familiar, not because it was perfect, but because it was known. Sometimes we hold on to the familiar and we make it into this grand thing, but the familiar, the past, it has concerns too, just like today does, just like tomorrow will. But they idolized. They looked forward to what they could have had if they had still been in Egypt, if it had only been like it used to be. This is quite the draw for all of humanity. It's still quite the draw for us. It's a draw not to want to change. Now, thinking about this, I started to think about change. And I don't actually mind change. Change that looks like variety, I actually love. I get bored easily. I like change that looks like variety, but not change that becomes a new monotony. Here's what I don't like. Loss. Loss is where I grieve change. And I think that loss is where many of us grieve change. It isn't that these Egyptians really, or that these Hebrews really wanted to become Egyptians. It isn't that they wanted to return back to where they had been. It was that they didn't want to lose what they had or lose what they knew. Church, we find ourselves in this transition right now in our own worship as we consider what it will be like to return back to our church. Will things change? Yes, they will change. Is it likely that many or most or all of us will come to church with masks? Yes. Is it probable or definite that we will be physically spaced? Absolutely. Will our offerings be separated in baskets instead of passed? Most probably. Will there be so many questions to ask? Definitely. And I've got to say, church, I'm lining up my cucumbers and onions that I would like to keep from before we had this virus, the things that we did just a few short months ago, and I want to hold on to those cucumbers and onions and say, but, I don't want loss. And yet here we are in the midst of change. So my question is, similar to the question that those Hebrews had, what will make this change worth it? See, they couldn't help the fact that they weren't going to have cucumbers and onions from Egypt anymore. In fact, they knew that it wasn't good for them to be back in Egypt. Just like we know that it isn't good for us to be exposing one another to illness. But what was the good that they were to look forward to? The promised land, which was the change. Together, church, even though we will all hunger for what was left behind, for what we knew, we will build a new future from this point forward. Will things ever be exactly the same? I'm not so sure. But will they be beautiful? Absolutely. I'm committed for us to work together on this and to build a future that is beautiful. To work together, and yes, though we remember the times that we had the blessings that were before, to also celebrate the blessings that are to come and what we will have in a gathering space of worshiping God. Let us not be so caught up in hungering for what was that we lose the blessing that is what is to come. Church, join me in praying for that blessing upon our congregation and upon our world. Oh Lord Jesus, we know that with change comes a hungering for what we have lost, but we know that with change comes new opportunities. May your blessing fall upon the Harbor Springs United Methodist Church. May your blessing fall upon our nation, upon our world, upon your followers, and upon those still waiting to hear your voice. Oh Lord, may your blessing come. And may this point of transition be not one where we continue to look backwards, but one where we look forwards at what may very well be the promised land of what you are about to build. Strengthen us through this transition. Hold us close and keep our eyes forward on what is to come. In your name.